So this physical therapist lost 20 pounds in 11 weeks. And in this interview, he's going to break down what was missing from his knowledge base. Because if you're a physical therapist, you have at the very least a master's degree in kinesiology, which is exercise science. And he was still missing the pieces between physical therapy and what was actually required to lose fat and build muscle. Now, about midway through this interview, he's going to talk about what changed within him, because it was the deeper change that actually created the ability for him to be consistent with his habits, and that involves his faith. So very, very interesting interview here for you guys. I think you'll find insightful and encouraging. And so without further ado, give this a watch and dive in. All right, I'm here with my man James. James, introduce yourself and tell the people how much weight have
Yep.
you lost.
I am James Mangano. I have lost almost 21 pounds in 11 weeks.
Let's go. That's awesome, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Dude, you crushed it. And I'm incredibly proud of you. I know we were talking last week and I was just like, people need to hear this. So tell the people a little bit about your lifestyle and like what your day-to-day looks like and where you were at before we started working together.
Um, so I'm a physical therapist. So I get in the office about 7. I work like 7 to 3. And then I've always done overtime or seen extra clients. So I'm typically not home till 6. I was doing like, hot yoga and lifting in the basement. And I was just kind of floating around with my workouts, but I was really never getting anywhere. So that's when I looked into what was going on with the Fall Kings.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what
Yeah.
what actually made a difference for you? Because you were working out before, right?
Yeah, I think everything you guys give us is just it's kind of straight to the point. And there's not a lot of fluff and there's a lot of noise out there. And I think the Fault Kings cuts right through the noise and gets to what you need. And it's back to the basics. It's none of the fluff and all the stuff you see on all the social media that just can drive you crazy and send you down the wrong path.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that there's so much information now that it almost creates paralysis by analysis, and people see so many paths, so they can't pick one.
Uh,
And
Yeah, totally. I tried intermittent fasting. I know we've talked about on ketosis on some of the modules, and you're trying to accomplish all this, and you just kind of get a bit of a mess. I know we talked last week, and I feel what kind of happens is like as you become a bit of an adult and you have kids and you start to get that dad bod. You go to the doctor and they're like your cholesterol's high, your blood pressure's high, you got to go on a diet. So what do? You start looking for things on the internet, you try to find out the right way to go, and then you start eating like a rabbit. And that's not the right thing either. And so you get away from the proteins and the things that you need to eat and the things that you learn in DK that you need to get you to where you want to be.
what were some of the things that you tried before this that didn't really stick?
I did intermittent fasting. I did Noom. The company paid for Noom. But you know, and again, a lot of times with Noom, with the coaching with Noom, it was like, oh, it's okay, you had a bad weekend. I feel like they were kind of enabling a lot of what you were doing, where you need to be told what works, and you learn that in DK.
That's interesting. That is very interesting because Noom is a popular one that I guess the claim is that there's going to be some kind of like psychological analysis of your habits. But what do you feel like the disconnect was? Because it sounds like, okay, you have, an off day and they say, oh, okay, it's okay. It felt almost enabling. Where did we come in to bridge that gap that felt different than Noom?
Um, we were trying to talk about this before, and I couldn't really come up with the word, but it's just kind of like the facts are the facts. This is what
Mm,
you have to do to lose weight. It's not okay to do certain things. Your calories need to be in this range. You need to have you need to work out until the end, until you have no reps in reserve. There's things that you learn in DK that nobody's telling you anywhere else.
gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm very glad. I'm very, very glad. I feel like
Yep.
I at least in my schooling studying kinesiology, I was very much like, okay, like I feel like we learned, what 99.9% of people need to do within the first few classes here. what else are we
Right,
talking about?
right, right,
Right.
right,
Um,
right. Yes, yes. Yeah. No, I think like like I said with Noom and some of the others, it was like, it's okay to have these fallbacks, and it was almost like allowing you to fall off. Where I feel like, especially maybe in just in society or in general, we need to have a little bit more the right guidelines and be a little bit more strict about what we're doing in order to get to where we need to be.
yeah, that's really interesting. How did that formulate in your mind as a physical therapist? Because obviously you're literally in the world of physiology, injury prevention, rehabilitation, and all these things. Um, like how come this felt like a worthy add-on to your pre-existing knowledge?
I think a lot of times, there's plenty of, physicians that know the facts too, and there's plenty of physical therapists and plenty of nurses and everybody who knows what they're supposed to do, but they still eat wrong and smoke and drink and so I kind of had the knowledge base, but it wasn't put together. So, going through the modules, hearing those things, I've gone to seminars and things like that. So all the sciencey stuff, like you guys like to say, so that clicked for me. Maybe a little bit easier, but that
Yeah.
would, yeah.
It's so interesting to think because so many people know generally what they kind of quote unquote need to do, or at least feel like they know what they need to do. What role did the accountability play in the process for you?
Well, I think, I've gone back to Noom too many times, but the calorie limit in Noom was way too high. So, and the other thing I learned was the protein, was how much protein I was supposed to eat. That was under Noom, it was kind of just, whatever you want, just hit this calorie goal. But the calorie goal was too high, I felt. And, knowing what I know now through DK and, the stress on the protein, there wasn't enough of that. I was eating salads every day and getting, burnt out on salads. I've only had a couple of salads, since being on DK here
That's
and there.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's kind of like a little bit of an inside joke in the group. It's like I don't remember the last time I had a salad. Maybe one this
Yep.
year. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you were able to eat that might have been surprising while you're losing the weight?
I like protein. It's enjoyable to eat, whether it's, salmon or steak or shrimp or, chicken, just pounding that stuff has been great. And, a couple of the other things that even just, the first handout you guys gave of, eating on the road or eating while you're traveling and, a lot of the Quest stuff I didn't know was that good. So, that can satisfy a sweet tooth where you're getting great protein from a Quest bar rather than having, cookies. So, because a lot of times, like if you have coffee, you're always thinking like, oh, coffee's paired with something sweet. So you have coffee and, a Quest bar, you're getting a lot of protein and you're not killing yourself.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
those alternatives to be able
yeah,
to
yeah,
satisfying craving. That's
yeah.
fantastic. I love that. Yeah. Okay. So I guess with this process, there's obviously a bunch different that we implement aside from like the physical. So what were some of the mindset shifts that for you took place that helped you be more consistent and more disciplined overall?
The spiritual component was something, I wasn't, I'd been following both you guys on Twitter and watching about it. So I knew there was a part of it, but watching the modules on that and kind of staring yourself down, um, those, because for people who don't know, there's nutrition modules, there's exercise modules, and there's really the spiritual modules. And you know, that was a big difference for me, and like I said, I'm doing things that I hadn't done. I'm reading the Bible, I am, I'm going to church more. So and those were things that I definitely wasn't doing before I started this.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How do you feel like that's going to impact you overall, like in other areas of life apart from just fitness?
Well, it's you just my wife calls it, the Holy Spirit. You feel good when you get out of church. You feel
Mm,
like it's, you feel good. I just don't know. I don't even know how to say it. And you're there with your family, and it's quiet time, and it's away from all the noise out there. Like I said, the noise of Twitter trying to teach you the wrong ways to eat. It takes you out of the noise of social media for an hour, and it's just peaceful, and you feel better about yourself.
that's awesome. That's awesome. That's incredible. Honestly, my secret agenda for everybody is that they get a little bit of a piece or a taste or an introduction to the Holy Spirit when they
Yeah,
come to this.
yeah, and it's I've almost I thought about if I could have if to talk to you guys about like uh, it's kind of it's shunned in this in the culture. And there's some people that try to, I don't know if you guys know anything about, like, I listen to, like, Charlie Kirk, and I listen to Jason Whitlock, and
Yeah.
so there are people that are trying to, like, break through, break out of that. And so if you see an athlete say, they thank God and stuff like that, it's like it's refreshing to hear, rather than it being kind of shut out of the popular culture the way it's been.
Yeah. I agree with that completely. I think it's been shut out of culture overall, and it's been totally shut out of the health conversation too. When, at least in my mind, it there's no separation between the two. So how did you see that component like tangibly connecting to health?
The quote that opens when you open the app, is, what does that say? Your body is, a product of God, and you want to honor that, and you want to honor your body, and you know, you don't want to be, overweight and look horrible. You want to honor what you were given, and I think about my kids, and you want them to be healthy and look good and feel good about themselves. And so you had parents who thought that way about you too. They don't want to see you
Mm.
become, you know a 55-year-old man who's 50 pounds overweight. They don't want to see that either.
Wow, that's so good. That's been a huge thing for me with the baby coming, is thinking about like how do I want my daughter to know like my love for her,
Hmm.
right? And as parents, we want the best in abundance for our children. And yeah, it's cool. It's cool to think like, oh, God loves us, even more incredibly.
Yeah,
We can even love our kids,
yeah, yeah,
and He wants
yeah,
the best for us. So that's awesome, man. I love that. I'm so glad that that was part of it for you,
yeah,
because I think that secretly that's the biggest gift on the other side of all the health stuff, right? Like getting fit is that's kind of a Trojan horse, but who you become in the process is that sticks with you for life. So that's
right.
awesome, man.
And you want
Um,
you want to you want to be there with them forever. You don't want to be on statins and high blood pressure medications and all this other stuff. Diabetes, metformin and all that other stuff. You want to be healthy and be able to play with, and I want to be able to golf with them forever. And then when they have kids, I want to be able to run around with them and not, be unable or out of breath, or huffing and puffing in the backyard with them. I want to be able to run around with
that's
them.
awesome. What do you feel like have been some of the tangible physical differences you felt after losing 21 pounds?
um, I'm more alert for sure. I'm more clear headed. I'm actually, like, I'm waking up before the alarm, and that's crazy. Um, those for sure, I can tell. Yeah.
I love that. That is fantastic, man. That is fantastic. I love
Yeah.
this, dude. I feel like I could talk to you for hours
Well, no,
upon
so, and
hours.
then, so the other thing too, is I never, so it's something else I should say. I just thought about, like, my strength gains. Like, I always hated leg day, and I'm making the most gains in leg day, which is
Wow.
crazy. And I like, just another concept that, maybe I knew or maybe I didn't, was the reps in reserve. Like, I didn't know to go that far. You'd go and you'd do 3 sets of 8, and it was kind of difficult, but why were you doing it? Or, what point were you getting to? It doesn't necessarily have to be that number. It's just get yourself to the point where you don't have much left in the tank. And that's just something I wasn't doing. I was just kind of floating. And now, that I'm pushing myself to that limit, I can see myself getting stronger in the numbers. And over 11 weeks, that didn't happen ever before. Like, if you put 5 more pounds on a squat or on a bench press over 10 weeks, that was a big deal. And just every week I see myself just bumping it up. So
That's so cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's almost like you start doing that and you're like, am I ever going to stop? I'm just gonna
Right.
keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
It's so cool. It's such a
yeah,
good feeling, man. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
It's one of the things that like I never get tired of because I mean, do this consistently for so long. And it's like this morning I went into the gym and I did something that I didn't think I was physically capable of that I've never done before. And it's like that's such a gift. I feel
I'm,
like
I'm, I'm I'm lifting more at 50 than I was at 30 for sure.
let's go. That is awesome, man. That is
Yeah,
awesome. I
yeah.
love that, man. Well, dude, man, like you've done so much, you've accomplished so much. Again, like there's so much we can talk about that you accomplished that is just it's incredible. It's inspiring to so many people. So I appreciate you putting in the work
Thank you.
and yeah, and being receptive to everything too. Um, I guess for you, obviously, like when you first start, before you start a process like this, there are those questions, there are those fears, there are those doubts that anybody's going through. So if there's anybody who's watching this who was where you were at before joining and they're like, I don't know, like I don't really know about this, what would you say to them as encouragement as to why they should commit and start today?
Um, I, it works. It's, it's not easy, but it's the simple principles that work. Caloric deficits, eating enough protein, reps in reserve, things like that that you learn that you didn't know and aren't part of the noise out there that, again, you guys make me laugh when I watch some of the modules about, eating grass-fed this and, you know, all these different crazy diets that are out there and getting in ketosis and keto and intermittent fasting. It's all just fads. And the way to get it done is going back to basics. Is keep it simple, stupid. It's simple, but it's not easy. You know, get yourself in a caloric deficit, lift till your hit reps in reserve, and eat protein, and start there, and you'll see a lot of changes from there. I'm 6 to 8 pounds away from my, you know, ideal body weight. And then once I get there, they talk about changing some things at that point. But I've kept those three basic principles are the things that I've taken out the most, and that's where I've seen 21 pounds come off.
Let's go. Awesome, man. Dude, thanks so much for doing this.
Of
Thank you for being
course.
inspiring to the people. And yeah, man, I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you.
Awesome.